The sun had just begun to peek over the rooftops, painting the suburban streets in soft gold. When Alex stepped out into their backyard, coffee in hand, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life built on small victories. Their solar panels glistened on the roof, silently harvesting sunlight and saving hundreds on electricity bills every month. It wasn't just about money, it was a lifestyle, a statement of independence, a way to live consciously in a world that often seemed careless. Life had been predictable, orderly, and even pleasant, until Karen moved in. At first, she seemed like every other neighbor, polite, superficial smiles and small talk at the mailbox. But it didn't take long for Alex to notice the subtle signs of entitlement that clung to her like a shadow. She had opinions on everything: how the garden should be trimmed, what color the mailbox should be, and who should park where. Alex tried to ignore it, believing that people like her existed everywhere. But deep down, a gnawing unease grew. The first sign of trouble came in a whisper, a faint flicker of the lights during dinner. Alex had shrugged it off, blaming the house's aging wiring, until the bills arrived. They were higher than ever, almost inexplicably so, despite the sunniest month on record. Confusion gave way to suspicion as Alex stared at the numbers, tracing the readings on the solar meter again and again. Something didn't add up. Then came the small, unsettling clues: a neighbor's comment about their amazing new solar setup, vague hints about someone borrowing power here and there. Alex's mind raced, connecting dots they didn't want to see. Could it be Karen? The thought seemed absurd, almost ridiculous. But the unease only deepened. Every time Alex passed her house, the lights in her garage seemed brighter, almost aggressively so, as if mocking the very concept of fairness. It was more than just electricity. It was intrusion, violation, a personal line crossed. And yet, confronting it was complicated. Karen had an aura of invincibility, reinforced by her tenure on the HOA board. Everyone in the neighborhood seemed hesitant to challenge her, tiptoeing around her demands and whims. Alex felt a mix of frustration and fear. Standing up to her could bring unwanted attention, but ignoring the theft gnawed at their conscience. That night, Alex sat on the back porch, staring at the solar panels under the fading glow of twilight. The gentle hum of energy flowing through the grid, something that once brought pride and peace, now felt fragile, violated. Somewhere across the yard, Karen's lights burned defiantly, a subtle but undeniable taunt. Alex clenched their fists and whispered to themselves, "This isn't over." And with that, the seed of a plan began to take root. A plan that would test patience, creativity, and courage. Little did Karen know, the quiet, conscientious homeowner next door was about to become an unyielding force. And the solar panels on the roof weren't the only thing about to shine. The next morning, Alex woke with a sense of urgency. The flickers, the unusual bills, the suspicion, they weren't going away on their own. Grabbing a notepad and flashlight, they went out to examine the solar meter, tracing wires and checking connections like a detective combing a crime scene. Every reading was precise, every panel accounted for, yet something still felt off. The numbers didn't lie, but they also didn't tell the whole story. Alex decided to dig deeper. They started keeping a meticulous log of energy production and consumption, recording every spike, every dip, every anomaly. Days passed, and a pattern began to emerge. Late at night, when the neighborhood should have been asleep, the meter's output fluctuated in ways that couldn't be explained by normal household use. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But the more Alex watched, the more undeniable it became. Someone else was siphoning energy. The emotional toll weighed heavily. Frustration gave way to disbelief, and disbelief to anger. How could someone just reach into another person's home, figuratively speaking, and steal the fruit of their effort? Alex replayed every interaction with Karen in their mind, recalling the moments that now seemed suspicious. The pointed comments about expensive electricity and her curious glances at the roof. The pieces were falling into place, and with each new connection, the knot of tension in Alex's stomach tightened. They decided to investigate further, carefully observing Karen's property from a distance. It was subtle at first, noticing which lights came on and when, watching her garage usage, even catching glimpses of strange wiring that seemed out of place. Alex's pulse quickened with every observation. It wasn't just a matter of lost electricity. It was a violation of trust, a betrayal of the neighborhood's quiet equilibrium. But proving it, that was the challenge. Alex needed more than suspicion. They needed evidence. They began taking photographs, timing energy spikes, and noting inconsistencies in the HOA-approved meters. Every day the picture became clearer. Karen was siphoning power from the solar grid. It was audacious, reckless, and illegal. But it also revealed something deeper about her character. She didn't care about fairness, rules, or the impact of her actions on others. She cared only about herself. The turning point came one evening when Alex noticed the unmistakable spike in energy consumption at precisely the moment Karen's garage lights blazed to life. Heart pounding, they realized the theft wasn't random. It was deliberate, calculated. Karen was literally using their power to light her home, as if she believed no one would ever notice, no one would ever stand up. The thought sent a shiver down Alex's spine, but alongside it was a spark of determination. This discovery marked a shift. Alex was no longer just a victim. They were an observer, a strategist, a homeowner armed with the knowledge of who was crossing the line. And as they turned to go back inside, notebook clutched tightly. A single thought burned in their mind. If she thinks she can get away with this, she hasn't met me yet. Alex knew they couldn't just sit back and watch Karen drain their solar power any longer. They decided it was time to confront her, but the first attempts were cautious. Polite, measured, careful not to escalate before gathering enough evidence. One sunny afternoon, Alex walked over to Karen's immaculate front porch, holding a folder of meticulously recorded readings. "Hi, Karen," Alex began, trying to keep their tone calm. "I noticed something strange with my solar grid, and I wanted to ask if you've seen anything unusual." Karen tilted her head, a slow, calculating smile spreading across her face. "Oh, Alex, I'm sure it's just a mistake. These new systems can be tricky. Maybe you're reading it wrong." Her words dripped with condescension, each one carefully designed to make Alex doubt themselves. But Alex wasn't fooled. Deep down, they knew the truth, and the frustration bubbled beneath the surface. "I've logged the numbers for weeks," they said, lifting the folder like a shield. "There are spikes at night that only line up with your house's usage. I'm not accusing you, I just want to understand what's happening." Karen laughed softly, almost dismissively. "Spikes? Oh, please, you're imagining things. I wouldn't touch your system even if I could." Her tone was sharp now, almost mocking. There was no apology, no concern, just an unshakable sense of entitlement. Alex stepped back, their heart hammering. The confrontation had not only failed, it had made the problem worse. They realized Karen wasn't just careless. She thrived on bending rules, enjoying the discomfort of anyone who tried to hold her accountable. The audacity of it stung, and for a moment, a wave of helplessness washed over Alex. The emotional intensity mounted as Karen continued to belittle Alex, hinting at her HOA connections and how things worked differently around here. The humiliation was palpable, but so was the determination. Alex refused to let this slide. Every fiber of their being told them that something had to change, not through yelling, not through empty threats, but through careful, calculated action. Returning home, Alex paced the backyard, eyes fixed on the glinting solar panels above. The betrayal was not just a practical problem, it was personal. Someone had invaded their sense of security, their hard work, and their peace of mind. And Karen, smug, unrepentant, untouchable in her mind, had no intention of stopping. That night, Alex sat in the quiet hum of the solar-powered house, notebook open, mind racing. Every observation, every detail, every spike in energy usage became a piece of a larger puzzle. They weren't just confronting Karen, they were strategizing, planning a comeback that required patience, intelligence, and timing, and with each thought, the fire inside Alex grew. They whispered to themselves, "She thinks she's untouchable. She's about to learn just how wrong she is." The confrontation had failed, but the battle was only beginning. And little did Karen know, her audacity had just made Alex more determined than ever. Alex spent the next few days in quiet observation, determined to understand exactly how Karen had been siphoning power from the solar grid. They treated it like a mission, carefully mapping every wire, every meter, and every moment when anomalies occurred. It was part detective work, part strategy, and part emotional release, a way to channel the frustration into something productive. They started with research, diving deep into HOA rules, electrical regulations, and solar technology. The more Alex learned, the more confident they became. Karen had exploited loopholes and loopholes alone. She relied on intimidation and the assumption that no one would notice. But Alex realized that if they acted smartly, methodically, and legally, they could turn the tables. In the evenings, Alex drafted a plan. It was intricate, like a chess game where every move had consequences. Step 1 was gathering indisputable proof. Photographs of suspicious wiring, meter readings time-stamped with precision, and a detailed log of energy usage. Step 2 involved timing their actions perfectly to coincide with Karen's nightly spikes. Step 3 required subtlety. No one could suspect retaliation. or the HOA might intervene on her behalf. The emotional weight of the plan was intense. Alex felt a mixture of fear and excitement, a cocktail that kept them alert and focused. The thought of finally reclaiming what was theirs and teaching Karen a lesson she couldn't ignore sent shivers down their spine. Every step of the plan had to be precise, every detail accounted for. This wasn't just about stolen electricity anymore. It was about justice, about standing up against entitlement, and about reclaiming dignity. Small obstacles threatened to derail the plan. Karen had installed extra lighting and timers, adding layers of complexity to Alex's observations. At one point, Alex nearly abandoned the idea, overwhelmed by the potential for mistakes. But determination won out. They reminded themselves of all the nights Karen had glared from her porch, of every smirk when Alex confronted her. Each memory became fuel, sharpening their focus and reinforcing their resolve. Alex also considered the broader consequences. They knew Karen was well connected within the HOA, and any direct accusation could backfire. The solution required creativity, subtlety, and leverage. They sketched diagrams, tested hypothetical scenarios, and even imagined Karen's reactions to each possible outcome. Every detail was scrutinized, every move rehearsed mentally until it felt inevitable. By the end of the week, the plan was ready. Alex sat on the porch, notebook in hand, staring at the panels reflecting the evening sun. There was satisfaction in knowing that they weren't helpless victims anymore. They were strategists, poised to turn the tables. The tension in their chest mingled with anticipation. Soon, Karen would face the consequences of her audacity. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, Alex whispered to themselves, a mix of excitement and warning. She thought she could get away with it. She has no idea what's coming. The stage was set. The plan was in motion. And in the quiet hum of the solar-powered house, Alex waited for the perfect moment to strike. The night was unusually still, as if the neighborhood itself was holding its breath. Alex had spent days planning, observing, and waiting for the perfect moment, and now everything hinged on timing. Sitting in the shadows near their garage, they double-checked the solar meter, ensuring the system was calibrated perfectly. Every wire, every connection, every panel was in place, ready to deliver the consequence Karen had earned. Alex's heart raced, equal parts fear and anticipation. They knew this wasn't just about electricity. It was about sending a message, asserting boundaries, and reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. For weeks, Karen had flaunted her audacity, assuming no one would challenge her. Now, the roles were about to reverse. The first spike came exactly as predicted. Karen flipped on her garage lights, illuminating the driveway with a brazen glow. Alex watched the meter react, noting the exact moment when the stolen power began to flow. They had prepared a subtle countermeasure, a calibrated increase in voltage designed to redirect the energy safely back toward their own system. It wasn't dangerous, not physically, but it was a precise shock to the ego, a way to assert control without crossing legal or ethical boundaries. As Karen leaned back to admire her handiwork, Alex initiated the next step. The lights flickered subtly at first, then more noticeably. Karen frowned, stepping closer to the switch. Confusion spread across her face as she tried to make sense of the fluctuations. Every flicker was deliberate, calculated, a quiet warning that the balance of power had shifted. Alex felt a thrill unlike any before. For the first time in weeks, the anxiety and frustration melted into satisfaction. They had transformed from victim to strategist, from powerless observer to orchestrator of consequences. The hours of planning, the meticulous logs, the late-night observations, all of it culminated in this moment. Karen's initial denial quickly turned to irritation, then panic. She opened the garage door, peered at the wiring, and muttered under her breath about faulty systems. Alex stayed out of sight, careful to maintain the element of surprise. Karen's expression shifted from confusion to realization. She had been caught in the act, and there was no plausible excuse left. The quiet satisfaction in Alex's chest was profound. This wasn't revenge in the petty sense. It was poetic justice, a reminder that audacity without accountability often leads to embarrassment. Karen had relied on her perceived invincibility, but the very thing she had underestimated, Alex's patience, intelligence, and resolve, was now the instrument of her comeuppance. By the time the neighborhood settled into the stillness of midnight, Karen's lights had dimmed, her smug confidence replaced with cautious calculation. Alex, watching from their porch, allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The lesson had been delivered, not through confrontation, not through anger, but through cleverness and persistence. As the last flicker faded, Alex whispered to the night, "Sometimes, the quiet ones are the most dangerous. In that silence, A sense of justice, satisfaction, and relief washed over them. The battle had been won, but the experience had taught an even more important lesson. Patience, strategy, and persistence often triumph where anger alone cannot. The following morning, the neighborhood seemed quieter, as if even the sun paused to observe the aftermath. Karen, normally loud and assertive, moved with a strange hesitancy. Her usual air of invincibility was gone, replaced with tension and subtle panic. Alex watched discreetly from the window, noting every shift in her demeanor, every glance toward their house. The power struggle had changed the dynamic entirely. Word of the unusual electrical activity spread quickly within the HOA, though no one yet knew all the details. Karen attempted to spin the story in her favor, claiming technical issues and malfunctions, but her tone lacked conviction. Those who had once silently tolerated her authority began to notice cracks in her armor. The very entitlement that had fueled her actions now worked against her. Alex remained calm, knowing that the evidence they had collected, logs, photographs, and precise energy readings, would speak for itself if needed. They had not only caught Karen in the act, but had done so in a way that couldn't be dismissed. Every flicker of her garage lights, every spike in energy consumption, now served as undeniable proof. The psychological weight on Karen was palpable. She could no longer project the confidence she had relied on for so long. Even more gratifying was the subtle shift in neighborhood perception. Neighbors who had whispered about her antics now regarded Alex with quiet admiration, their respect growing for the homeowner who had acted with patience and intelligence rather than impulsive confrontation. Karen, once the unchallenged figure of control, found herself isolated. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone could sense it. Karen attempted a private confrontation, cornering Alex in the driveway with forced politeness. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she hissed. "You can't just—" Alex interrupted, calm but firm. "I followed the data, Karen. The meter doesn't lie. You've been siphoning power from my solar panels." Her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The denial that had sustained her through weeks of audacity crumbled in an instant. "That's impossible," she stammered, but the conviction was gone. Alex didn't need to argue further. The proof was irrefutable, and the quiet satisfaction in their chest was stronger than any confrontation could be. The HOA board eventually became aware of the situation, and Karen's influence within the community was questioned. Quietly, without public spectacle, accountability was restored. Alex didn't boast or celebrate publicly. They let the results speak for themselves. Karen's arrogance had been dismantled, her entitlement exposed, and the neighborhood learned a subtle but important lesson about boundaries, respect, and justice. Sitting on their porch that evening, Alex watched the sunset reflect off the solar panels, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. They had faced audacity, deceit, and intimidation, and had emerged victorious. But more than victory, they had learned a crucial truth. Patience, strategy, and a careful approach often achieve what anger and confrontation cannot. As the last light of day faded, Alex smiled to themselves, thinking quietly, "Power is more than electricity. It's knowing when to act and how to reclaim what's yours." The days that followed were quieter, almost serene. Alex moved through their home with a renewed sense of peace, the solar panels gleaming in the sun as if celebrating their victory in silence. The ordeal with Karen, once a source of stress, had become a lesson, not just in strategy or persistence, but in resilience and self-respect. Looking back, Alex realized how easily the situation could have spiraled. A direct confrontation, fueled by anger, might have escalated into neighborhood drama, HOA disputes, or even legal complications. Instead, patience, observation, and careful planning had turned frustration into empowerment. They had proven that intelligence and persistence often outperform impulsiveness and arrogance. The experience also revealed the subtler dynamics of entitlement. Karen had thrived on the assumption that no one would challenge her, relying on intimidation and status rather than merit or fairness. It was a stark reminder of how easily power can be misused, and how important it is to remain vigilant, not only for oneself, but for the community at large. Alex found satisfaction in reclaiming what was theirs, but more importantly, in restoring a sense of balance and fairness. As they sipped coffee on the porch one morning, Alex reflected on the journey. There had been fear, uncertainty, and anger, but also determination, cleverness, and quiet triumph. The solar panels weren't just producing energy. They had become a symbol of self-reliance and perseverance. Every flicker of light, every spike of power, now carried a story of standing firm, of asserting boundaries, and of reclaiming dignity without losing composure. Alex thought about Karen, too, imagining her own reflection in the mirror. Perhaps she would never change. Perhaps entitlement would continue to define her actions. But that was no longer Alex's burden. The lesson had been delivered, the balance restored, and a clear message sent. Audacity unchecked meets its match eventually. The final takeaway resonated deeply. Life often tests patience, courage, and creativity. When faced with unfairness or outright theft, rushing in with anger may satisfy the moment, but it rarely resolves the problem. Observing carefully, planning strategically, and acting decisively creates outcomes that endure, earning respect rather than provoking chaos. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Alex whispered to the quiet neighborhood. Sometimes the smallest actions, guided by patience and intelligence, carry the greatest power. Are we brave enough to stand for what's right when no one else will? And with that, the day ended, leaving the sense of justice complete, the panels gleaming, and a story of empowerment, cleverness, and moral victory lingering in the air. It was a lesson Alex and the neighborhood would not soon forget.